And finally, I'd like to turn to our May revenue numbers. As we all know, the restrictions on businesses and public events during this pandemic have resulted in losses of jobs and of income, and our state revenues absolutely reflect that. For May, our revenues are about 20% below where they were in May of 2019. However, this is slightly better than we anticipated, and I'd like to ask our Secretary of Finance, Aubrey Lane, to come forward and to put these figures in context. Aubrey, thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Aubrey Lane, Secretary of Finance. As the Governor mentioned, it was about 90 days ago when the state first started beginning to feel the impacts of the COVID-19, not only on our businesses, but also on our state revenues. And as you recall, obviously the Governor said from the very beginning this public health crisis was going to result in an economic crisis. It was a time of a lot of uncertainty, not only related to the health crisis, but some of the actions that we took, like delaying income tax payments that would normally come in May 1st to June 1st, really complicated how we would look at the revenues for the final quarter of our year, which ends June 30th. So at that time, based on the data we had, we estimated that we would be down about $1 billion for this fourth quarter in the fiscal year of 2020. And if you go back and look, in April of this year, our revenues were down 26%. And the Governor has just announced that as of May, our revenues were down another 20%. And this represents about $800 million below what our projected revenues were going to be for the quarter and for year to date in our plan. And as I said, we projected that to be $1 billion. So this is better than where we thought we were going to be because, remember, in June, all those tax payments that would have come in May or April in the previous year are now going to come in the month of June. So almost all of the loss that we've incurred so far is in what's called non-withholding, or the payment of payroll taxes from the previous year and some estimates for the current year. So while we have about 19 days left in our fiscal year, it looks like we're going to be, I won't say significant, but better than what we projected. Now, I think this has to do for a couple of reasons. One, the underlying resiliency of the Virginia economy. The Governor has mentioned several times that we were very strong in our economics before we went into this, and that has helped us through this time. In fact, if you look at payroll withholding, the largest portion of our revenues across all businesses, for the months of April and May, we were down about 4.5%. Now, the headlines have been a lot more than that. I mean, some businesses have closed, and they're obviously very significantly impacted. But many have been able to remain open because of teleworking and our reliance on defense spending and the federal government. In fact, some of our largest employers have seen hardly any decline in their payroll that they have paid the state over this period of time. It also has to do with the federal actions taken, whether it's through the monetary policy of making sure our financial markets work well and giving businesses confidence, but also the payroll protection plan, where the federal government gave money to businesses so they could retain their employees. And of course, by doing that, they were able to pay us. So this does not by any means that everything is great and it's an all clear. It's still a very difficult time for the state and for many businesses. But you just heard the Governor mention a little while ago about how the virus seems to be abating in the Commonwealth. Well, while that's happening, business activity is picking up. You saw the jobs report last month in the nation. We actually called back 2.5 million workers. The same will hold true in Virginia because it appears that we're much closer to a bottom than we were a few months ago. And that doesn't mean it's going to turn around quickly by any stretch. But what this does mean is that we will have good data points as we forecast our revenues for the new biennium budget. And so that will happen, the Governor mentioned the other day, sometime in the month of July, and he will call a special session at his pleasure sometime later in August, where we'll discuss all this. But just wanted to point out that with all the calls of uncertainty, it looks as if Virginia, at least through this fiscal year, is going to be within what we thought was going to happen. The actions we took the governor took by suspending discretionary spending, by suspending capital payments, have also helped to build our cash reserves. So it appears that as we go into the end of this fiscal year and go into our next biennium budget, we'll be starting from a place that we can get a forecast from that would be meaningful and not just based on political rhetoric or some headline that doesn't represent what the underlying economics are in the Commonwealth. So with that, Governor, thank you very much for having me today.